All right, everyone, welcome back to DA Sports. I'm your host, DASASIN. Welcome. This is episode number 6 of DA Sports. Today we have a very big show. A lot to get into. Actually had to cut some stuff out just because of all the stuff that's going on right now. So I'm going to try to get through it, keep you guys entertained and informed at the same time. So we've got to go over Thursday Night Football recap. We're also going to go over the recap from the question of the week from last episode. We're also going to talk about some of the games for tomorrow, NCAA Saturday. We also have some breaking news from the NBA that we're going to touch on. And then, of course, we're going to get into our NFL picks for Sunday. So let's get to it. So for starters, we're going to recap Thursday Night Football. For those that did stay awake to watch the entire thing, it was the Cowboys beating the Giants 20-15. Very low scoring game. Ironically, the spread in the game was 5.5. So the score ending with a 5-point lead just kind of goes to show how much on point these bet liners are really onto it, because 5 points is a really odd line. It's not a natural line like 3, 4, 7. So 5.5, and it actually hit on 5. And with it hitting on 5, with the kicker missing a kick, and who's been pretty much automatic all season, kind of crazy, but that's how it goes in NFL. I want to touch on a couple of things in regards to the game. Individually, I'm talking about each team. So to start, let's talk about the Cowboys. This might have been the most disappointing win by any team all season. Like, yes, they got the win, and that's your goal at the end of the day, is to win games. So they did that. But I don't think there's a Cowboy fan anywhere who felt good about that win against the Giants. The Giants are not very good, and they had several chances to win. And I'm going to touch on this a little bit later, but had their quarterback been average, they probably would have won pretty easily. The Cowboys got out to a fast start. You know, they made a conscious effort to get CeeDee Lamb involved, which made sense. And typically the formula for Dallas is that if they can get out up front and score, then they're tough to beat. Unfortunately, they did get out early and score, but they weren't able to pull away from the Giants. And even though the Giants couldn't score any touchdowns, they were still in the game with field goal after field goal after field goal. And as a Dallas Cowboys fan, I'm sure you guys are not happy with that performance. But they do have a mini bye, so they have more time to recover, because the next few games in their schedule are a lot tougher. Unfortunately, it looks like they had some injuries in the games, including Michael Parsons, which would be huge. Hopefully he's okay. There are some people saying that he may be out for 2 to 3 weeks, but we'll see. Now, to touch on the Giants. The Giants and their fan base have to be kicking themselves. A couple years ago, they paid money to Daniel Jones and not paid money to Saquon Barkley, even though Saquon Barkley was a lot cheaper. But they deemed that paying Saquon top of running back money was worse than paying Daniel Jones above average quarterback money. And from everything that we've seen on the field, that was dumb. Now, granted, most people before they made the move thought that that was dumb, but it's showing itself more and more every week. Saquon is balling in Philadelphia, and Daniel Jones looks below average, to put it mildly. The Giants lost this game by 5 points, but there were legitimately about 4 passes that could have led to more points. Obviously, there's the obvious ones. He had one to Slayton deep where he underthrew him, and they had to wait on the ball. There was another one that was underthrown to Neighbors, where it led to an interception but got called back because of a penalty. Actually, there was 2 that went to Neighbors that could have been touchdowns. There was also another one that most people kind of glanced over before some of the later passes happened, where it was like 3rd and 4 or 5, and I believe it was Neighbors. He ran like a zig route, so like a slanting out, and he clearly was the number one option on the pattern. Daniel Jones throws the ball so far behind him that when he has to stop his momentum to catch the ball, and he can't turn up the field. And it was late. And that was the biggest thing with like most of his throws. They were all late. Even if the pass was off a little bit, but it was on time, Neighbors would have had time to catch the ball and then turn back the other way and get upfield. But because the ball was late and off target, he literally had to turn into the defender, and he got tackled and couldn't make a first down, and they had to kick a field goal. That was before their second field goal. Literally, Daniel Jones cost them, I would say, at least 8 points, where two of the drives where they had field goals could have led to touchdowns. So that's not even including the deep passes where if he just throws the ball out there, Slayton and Neighbors run in for a touchdown easily, and the game's maybe not even close. I don't see how the Giants can move forward with Daniel Jones going into next year. And considering how many top-tier quarterbacks we have in college this year, I think that's what the Giants are going to be focused on in their first-round pick. And since they're going to suck all year, they should have an early pick, which means they should get somebody good. But that's pretty much it for Thursday Night Football. Like I said, Cowboys won, but nothing to be proud of. The Giants lost, and it's pretty clear at this point that they're terrible. So before we move on into Saturday and Sunday, we're going to recap the question of the week that I brought up in the last episode. The question of the week, for those that missed it, was who is the most overpaid quarterback in the league? The options were Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, Tua Tagovailoa, Joe Burrow, and Dak Prescott. Interestingly enough, the feedback that you guys gave me was actually all over the place. Essentially, at least one person picked every single person on the list, which I found to be interesting. I kind of thought it was all going to be towards one person, but it wasn't. But it also makes sense because I think there's a case to be made for every single person in that group. So I'm going to go through and just give you my reasoning for who I think actually is the most overpaid quarterback out of that group. And I'm going to go from reverse order as far as out of the five, who's the least overpaid, and work my way down to the most overpaid quarterback. So at 5, I'm actually going to say it's Joe Burrow. I think, yes, he can be qualified as being overpaid because he does have injury concerns. Essentially, he makes it through every other season. But the thing is, with him making it through every other season, every other of those healthy seasons, he's had his team, deep in the playoffs. So even though, yes, his injury causes concern for the price point he's getting paid, I believe he's tied for the second highest paid quarterback in the league. But at least he can say he got his team to a Super Bowl. And the Bengals were pretty much trash before he got there. So, yes, he's still overpaid, but not as overpaid as the other ones. So the next one I'm going to say would be Dak. I would say he's probably 4th on that list of 5 in terms of most overpaid. And the reason why I say that is Dak, unlike some of the other 3, has actually had playoff success. Even though it's not much playoff success, and he doesn't play as well as he should in the playoffs compared to the regular season, typically they do have good regular season win totals, and they at least get to the playoffs, and he does have 2 playoff wins. Yes, he's the highest paid quarterback in the league. No, he's not the best quarterback in the league, not even a top 5 quarterback, which is why he falls into this overpaid list. But I don't think it's as bad as the other 3 that I'm about to mention. The bottom 3 got a little tough. For me, the third most overpaid is actually Deshaun Watson. And I know a lot of the early votes people put in was for Deshaun Watson being the most overpaid. And I could definitely see why, considering the fact that he hasn't had any production. I think he's arguably had 2 to 3 good games throughout his entire career while being a Cleveland Brown. The only reason why I say he's the third most paid is because, unlike these other quarterbacks that I mentioned, he's actually at the end of his current contract. His contract was signed so long ago that at this point, the Browns are towards the end of the contract. I believe there's only 1 or 2 years left. So if next year they decide, okay, they want to move on, it's not as big of a hit. Essentially, what the Broncos are paying for Russell Wilson to be on the Steelers is more than what the Browns will be paying Watson if they let him go next year. So, with that being said, yes, he's overpaid because he hasn't had much production, but because he's at the end of his contract, it's not as bad as the last two. The second most overpaid that I'm going to say is Tua Tagovailoa. His contract was just redone. The one saving grace for him is that he's not in that top 5, I believe, highest paid quarterbacks. He does have an injury history, which is why I say that he's on this list, and his contract is new, so there's a lot of money left, a lot of years left, but his injury concerns are a problem. There is a debate whether or not he'll even come back, and since I believe about $100 million of his contract was fully guaranteed, he gets paid that no matter what. So for the organization, that sucks. I don't know how much you can trust him going forward. Even if he does come back after being on IR, who knows how many games he's going to play. So for now, he's second most overpaid. But number one, to me, is Trevor Lawrence. Now, Trevor Lawrence essentially falls into the category of having a little of everything about the bad things that I mentioned about the other previous four. Now, for starters, he's the second highest paid contract in the league, so only behind Dak in terms of amount of money he gets per year. He does have one playoff win. The game against the Chargers were the one who were up, and then they blew the lead and he came back and won. So he does have one playoff win, which technically is more than what Watson has in Cleveland. But nonetheless, and it's more than what Tua has at all. But nonetheless, it was a while ago. And Trevor Lawrence has had injury issues. And his contract is brand new, so he still has a lot of years, a lot of money left, but more money than Tua. And the worst part about it is there's no improvement. Like, as bad as Watson has been, I would say Watson today doesn't look as bad as he looked 2 seasons ago. As bad as it is that Tua's hurt, Tua looks better than he did 2 seasons ago. As unproductive as Dak is in the playoffs, there's still been a progression in his overall game. With Trevor Lawrence, there hasn't been any progression. Trevor Lawrence today, to me, looks worse than he looked a year and a half ago. So with that being said, and the amount of money that's on his contract, to me, he's the most overpaid quarterback in the league. That's it for the question of the week. We're going to get into tomorrow's NCAA games. There's 3 games I want to touch on. These are the 3 biggest games of the week. The first one, Louisville playing at Notre Dame. Louisville is ranked 15th. Notre Dame is ranked 16th, and Louisville's 3-0. Notre Dame is 3-1. Right now, Notre Dame is favored by 6.5 at home. Now, this one is kind of tough to kind of expect. I don't think most people expected much from Louisville going into this season, but they have looked decent so far. Notre Dame's been up and down. Obviously, they had that really bad loss to Northern Illinois, but then they came back and won the following week, which is why they're favored and they're at home. I went back and forth, but I actually do think Notre Dame will win this game. I do think it'll be pretty close, but I think they'll end up probably covering at the end. You know, maybe they're up 3 most of the game and then they get a late score or something and win by 10 or 7, something of that nature. But I do think Notre Dame will win the game and cover the spread. The next game I'm going to talk about is between 2 undefeated teams in the Big Ten. That's 4-0 Fighting Illini, University of Illinois, against Penn State, who's 3-0. Now, Illinois is ranked 19th, and Penn State is ranked 9th. Now, Penn State has high hopes going into the season. A lot of people pretty much expected them to be in that 12-team playoff mix. Illinois, on the other hand, was not expected to do anything. This is a big Big Ten rivalry type game. They're not obviously the most rival for the 2 schools, but because they play each other regularly, there is that in-conference battle. The spread right now, when I last checked, was 19.5. I think people are overlooking Illinois a little bit, and I think because of the preseason expectations of Penn State and with the game being in Penn State is why the spread's so high. I actually think that Penn State will get the win, but I do think Illinois will cover that 19.5 points. So if you're betting on it, I would take Illinois plus 19.5. Now, lastly, the most important game of the weekend, the biggest game that everybody's going to be talking about, the game that Game Day is going to be a part of, is down in Tuscaloosa, and that's Georgia versus Alabama. Georgia and Alabama are both undefeated. Georgia is 3-0 and Alabama is 3-0. Georgia's ranked 2 and Alabama's ranked 4. And at the last time I checked, Georgia is favored by 1 point in Alabama. Now, this is going to be a huge game. Usually, when we've gotten this game, it's been at the end of the year. So the fact that we're getting it this early in the season is pretty remarkable. It kind of shows like the depth of schedule that both teams have. And this is the first time they're playing without Nick Saban. Kalen DeBoer is taking over. Obviously, they're on track so far, winning every game. But this is like his first big time test where he has a lot of expectations. And I actually think that Georgia is going to play this game close and they're going to end up with the win. I just think that because they've been tested so far this season, and I don't feel like Alabama has really got a chance to figure out who they really are. They haven't had to dig deep late in the game kind of situation. I think that test that Georgia had against Kentucky is going to help them be better prepared for this game against Alabama, and I think that they'll go into Tuscaloosa and get the win. Before we get into some things for Sunday, we got to talk briefly about the NBA breaking news that just got announced earlier, and that is the trade being worked out between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the New York Knicks. The Minnesota Timberwolves are trading Karl Anthony Towns to the Knicks in exchange for Julius Randle, DiVincenzo, and a first-round pick. Now, this is one of those rare occasions where I actually think that the trade makes both teams better. And here's why. To me, Karl Anthony Towns is not a one-off, like, carry the team type of player. Now, granted, Minnesota does have Anthony Edwards, and Rudy Gobert is a big-time name, but Rudy Gobert is not taking over a game, ever. He's just a defensive presence because he's tall and stuff like that. But essentially, they look to Ant-Man to take over games. And when they tried to have Cat take over games, he was capable of it in times. But he doesn't really have the demeanor to be like, okay, I'm going to be the guy. I'm the best guy on the court at this particular time, and I'm going to take over. And personally, I think that they realized that they needed more depth. Like, they could get the scoring that they get from Cat with somebody who has more of a dog mentality that fits Ant-Man, which is what I think Julius Randle will provide. Can Julius Randle score as many points as Cat? Probably not. But the difference in scoring is minimal. But I think Julius Randle has a better mentality in how he approaches the game. And I think that's going to mix better with Ant-Man. And then you add in the explosiveness of DiVincenzo and the three-point shooting. You think about it, Ant-Man draws so much attention getting into the lane. Having DiVincenzo on the outside just raining three-pointers is a great mix. So they still get scoring with Julius Randle. They get a mentality that fits their scheme more. And they also get some desperately needed outside shooting. So I think Minnesota actually got better. And with that, though, I think the Knicks still got better because the Knicks have acquired so much talent between the last two off seasons, basically making their whole Villanova team all over again in the Knicks jersey. But because they've acquired so much talent, I think Julius Randle and DiVincenzo's presence in the Knicks lineup is kind of lessened. So for them, being able to replace those two with one that you can get more out of makes sense for them because they have such a committee. And because they have such a committee, they don't need very much from Cat. They're not going to ask Cat to just take over the game by himself. You know, they have a leader in Brunson to do that. And they have other people on their team to really kind of galvanize everything to where I don't think they're going to look for Cat to take over. He just can really just fit into the role and work in their team better. And I think it actually makes them better. So, like I said, in the rare occasion like this, I do think both teams got better. Really looking forward to the NBA season to get started so we can really dive into seeing who's going to be better than who. But the trade is definitely an exciting way to kind of lead into preseason that should be starting soon. Now, in terms of Sunday, two things going on Sunday. We got the WNBA and the NFL So we're going to start with the WNBA since the first round is over. And I think it was 2 episodes ago I gave you my predictions for the first round. And all of my predictions were correct. The Liberty beat the Dream. The Aces beat the Storm, unfortunately. The Sun beat the Fever. And the Lynx beat the Mercury. Now, I expected the Liberty to beat the Dream by a sweep, but the other ones to all go to 3 games. And I was wrong because they all ended up in a sweep. And the better team pretty much showed that they were the better team from jump. So this leads to the semifinal round, and I'm going to give you my predictions for that. But before I get into that, actually, one thing, with the popularity of the WNBA rising, I really hope that next year they make the first round best of 5 instead of best of 3. The way the format works is the first 2 games go to the home team, and then the third game goes to the away team. But it's like, if you made it to the playoffs, I feel like you should be entitled to at least 1 home game. And since they don't want to pay to have them go back and forth and do 1-1-1, then they should, I think they need to extend it. So at least teams like the Fever, who obviously are probably the most marketable team right now, if they make the playoffs, they should get a playoff game, at least 1 game for their home crowd to get to see them play, because it's kind of like you've earned the right to at least get 1 more game in front of your crowd. So I think they should change the first round to best of 5. It's something they should definitely consider, especially with the expansion teams coming in and so much money coming in with all the rookies that, helped everything explode this year. So definitely something to consider. But as for the rest of the playoffs, this next round, we have the Liberty against the Aces and the Lynx against the Sun. Now, the Liberty have had the best record in the league all year. I haven't looked at the odds yet, but for me personally, I'm going to take the Aces in 5 games. I just think, like I said, in the first round, I feel like Asia Wilson is determined to not be stopped. And until somebody can actually beat the Aces in a series, I'm not betting against them. So I have the Aces beating the Liberty in 5 and moving on to the finals to try to go for a 3-peat. As for the other series, I have the Connecticut Sun beating the Minnesota Lynx in 4 games. Again, I just think that their team chemistry and their toughness really reign supreme. They pretty much beat up the Fever, and I think they're going to do the same thing to the Lynx. I think the Lynx have more depth and more scoring ability overall, but I do think the Sun are going to pull this out in 4 games and meet the Aces in the finals. All right, so lastly, we're going to get into the NFL picks for Sunday. For those new to the channel, I do a set of picks for Sunday's games. There's a pick 3 where I pick 3 teams that are in games that are close that could go either way, where I think they're going to win. Then I give you my lock of the week, where I feel like this is the easiest game to pick in terms of who's going to win the game. And then I give you my underdog pick of the week for the team that is favored to lose by more than 3 points, but that they're actually going to win the game. So to start, we're going to go with my pick 3 for week 4 of the NFL season. So to start, I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens to beat the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Ravens are only 1-2, and the Bills are 3-0. But the Ravens are at home, and they're favored to win by 2.5 points. I think that Buffalo has shown on the field that they're the better team. But I think it's a big product of that is their level of competition. I think the Ravens have been tested more because they've played better competition. I think 2 out of the 3 teams they've played are playoff teams. And I think 0 out of the 3 teams that Buffalo's played are playoff teams. And I think that testing is going to help them get through this game against Buffalo, kind of help them right the ship a little bit, kind of bring Buffalo down to size, realizing that, okay, they still have some more things to work on to get to that top tier level of teams left in the league. So I do think that Baltimore will pull it out and win this game. The next game I'm picking in my pick 3 is the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are 2.5-point favorites against the Colts in Indianapolis. I do believe the Steelers are going to win. The Steelers are undefeated. The Steelers' defense is the strength of their team. The way Justin Fields has been playing has really paired perfectly with the defense. He hasn't been making mistakes. He's taken advantage of his opportunities to run with the ball when he needs to. So he's not forcing throws, and I think that marriage is going to fit perfectly into the game plan to beat the Colts. AR, the quarterback for the Colts, is very explosive. He has a propensity for big-time plays, but he also has the same propensity to make mistakes. And I think if you make mistakes against this Steelers defense, they'll make you pay. And I think that's what's going to happen in this game. So I think the Steelers will go into Indy and beat them pretty soundly. I think they'll cover the 2.5 points. And then lastly for the pick 3, it's the Vikings on the road against the Green Bay Packers. Now the Packers are favored by 2.5 at this point. I think mainly because there's some optimism that Jordan Love is actually going to be able to play. I personally think that the Vikings are going to win this game, even though they're 2.5 point underdogs. Even if Jordan Love does play, I think the way that the Vikings defense has been flying around, they've pretty much looked like the best defense in the league so far. I mentioned them in last week's recap, the way that Brian Flores has been leading this defense and getting them to fly around is really going to pay dividends for them. And I think that's going to hold true even if Love is back. I think if Malik Willis plays, this game is going to get out of hand. I think the Vikings will win by more than 10 points. But if Jordan Love plays, I still think that the Vikings will still be able to get the win. And that is my last pick as part of the pick 3. Now for my lock of the week, I'm going with the Kansas City Chiefs to beat the LA Chargers in LA this Sunday. Now, right now the Chiefs are favored by 7.5. So, and I could see that line getting bigger. Now, the Chiefs and Chargers always play each other tough. Usually, I'm actually at the game, but this year I'm not going to make it. I'm going to be at home watching the game, but I still think that the Chiefs will handle business. I actually think when they play the Chargers, they play better out here in LA than they do when they're in Kansas City. I think they match up really well, even though the defense is really honed in on the style of play that the Chiefs have. The problem here is that one of the biggest things that has made their games competitive in the past is Derwin James. Derwin James does a great job guarding Kelsey. He's very physical, and he makes it a pride thing to really try to shut him down. But Derwin James is suspended, so he won't be playing in this game. I don't know who their backup is for him, but whoever it is not going to do as good of a job as Derwin James will do. And considering how much attention there is on Kelsey's lack of numbers so far this season, I think they're going to make that a focal point without Derwin James being there. And Kelsey's probably going to go crazy. And he usually does go crazy against the Chargers anyway, so I feel like it's going to be even worse. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Kelsey goes for over 100 yards this game. The other thing is that the Chargers have injuries to their offensive line, and Justin Herbert is hurt. Now, they say Herbert's going to play, but even if he does play, he's not going to be 100%. And the Chiefs' defense has been flying around all season, so I just think all of that together leads to the Chiefs winning this game pretty easily. Now, as far as my underdog pick of the week. Again, for my underdog pick of the week, it has to be a team that's favored to lose by more than 3 points. And this is kind of dicey, but the spread right now is 3.5. So it still counts. And my underdog pick of the week is the Washington Commanders going into Arizona and beating the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals are favored to win by 3.5. Their offense has looked explosive, and Washington has looked like they can't stop anybody. So it makes sense why Arizona is favored. I would think, conventionally speaking, that Arizona should beat the Commanders. But I think with the confidence that Jaden Daniels has been picking up, he's improved game after game after game. I think that he'll be able to outduel Kyler Murray in Arizona, and they'll be able to come out with a win. I believe the last time I checked, the point total is around 48. I definitely think that's going over. I think both defenses are going to get tested. But for my underdog pick of the week, I do think that the Washington Commanders will pull out the win. All right, so that is it for episode 6. Thank you all for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Please make sure you like and subscribe. The subscribe button will pop up right here. And look forward to hearing from you guys, hearing more feedback, and you guys tuning in to following episodes. Thanks. Peace.